Kristin, and you're listening to Podcast and Amplify, a podcast for women and women of color entrepreneurs who want to amplify their voice and brand through podcasting and grow a wildly successful business. I'm the executive producer and host of 2 shows and an entrepreneur, and I love helping women grow their visibility, mindset, and business to the next level. Each week, I share tips on how to launch and leverage your podcast, and I'm bringing on the very best business leaders to give you advice on how to build your business empire. Let's amplify your voice and business. Hey listeners, welcome back to the show. My name's Kristin. I'm your host. So on today's show, we're talking about why now is a great time to start a podcast. Well, if you've been toying with the idea of starting a podcast to grow your brand, this is a great time to become a podcaster. But don't just take my word for it. Let's look at what the data says about podcasting's potential. So podcasts now reach over 100 million people in the US. Now, that means that more than a third of Americans are listening to podcasts, and it just continues to grow. And most of those podcast listeners are listening to, on average, 7 podcasts at a time. So that 100 million is really like 700 million, right? Because they're listening to multiple podcasts. Now, according to Edison Research from 2019 to 2020, there was a 5% increase in US podcast listeners. And that means that there's 5 million more potential listeners than last year. And I think this from 2020 to 2021 has tracked similarly. So you have that many more potential listeners that will tune into your show and potential customers if you're using your podcast to sell your service or your product. Now, globally, the podcast market is expected to reach over $60.5 billion by 2027. I can't really even wrap my brain around that much money, but it's not just listeners in the US that are growing. This is growing around the world. So you have an opportunity to reach whole new audiences in all different parts of the world. Now, not only do the numbers show how quickly podcast listening is growing, but some really big companies came online in 2020, and we've seen that some of the biggest streaming companies have modified their platforms specifically for podcast listening. So iTunes created Apple Podcasts, Google launched Google Podcast, Amazon Music and Spotify have really shifted from being exclusively music platforms to audio platforms that include podcasting. And the word podcasting has really just become a lot more pervasive in our society. I think there's a TV show where the main character is a podcaster. They are definitely becoming more mainstream. And the thing about podcast listeners is they are super loyal and they love podcasts. It's kind of one of those things where if you're in, you're in. And if you're out, you don't even know what a podcast is. So it's a little bit extreme. But fortunately, the people who are in and love them are like all in, and they're very committed to listening to their podcasts week after week or binging them. You know, it's a medium that has tons of choices for the way that you want to listen and engage and share it with your friends. So as you can see, the potential to grow your audience is huge. And it also means that you'll likely have an audience for your podcast, no matter what your niche is. So there are a lot of podcasts out there, but the good news is if you really hone in on your niche and you speak to your people, they're going to find you and you're going to attract them because you are speaking their language. And that's what differentiates you from in your business and in your podcast, and really what you should be focusing on to help you stand out from other podcasts. So now really is the best time to amplify your voice and your business and your brand through podcasting. It's an exciting time. And I would love to help you launch your podcast to help grow your business and your community and your visibility. So reach out to me or go to my website and you can sign up for a free workshop. It's the 3 secrets to starting a successful podcast that I've put together. It's no fluff, super succinct, and I created it to really take the overwhelm and the guesswork out of what you need to start your podcast. So go ahead and check that out. And thank you so much for listening today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe so you don't miss a show. And rating and reviewing this podcast is the best way to help support us. Always remember, your voice and what you have to offer is needed in the world. Until next week, take care.